Sign diagrams consist of a number line, on that number line there are critical values, and the critical values that we need to establish are zeros and asymptotes. Then we will have positive and negative signs stating whether that function is positive or negative at certain intervals. And remember, positive means above the x-axis. Or in other words, the result of that function is positive. The y value is positive. Or negative means below the x-axis. Another way of thinking of that is the y value is negative. Okay, so for example, if we have y equals x squared, subtract x, subtract 6, we can factor that, x subtract 3x plus 2, and therefore the zeros, what causes this function to equal 0, are x is 3 or negative 2. So the zeros actually are 3, 0 and negative 2, 0. So the sign diagram for this would be a negative 2, a positive 3. So then we have these three intervals with which to think about. Is the function above the x-axis at each of those intervals or below the x-axis at each of those intervals? And if we don't know what that looks like, we could just tell by what the graph looks like. But we could also, if we can't remember or don't know what the graph looks like, we can try some values in there. So something smaller than negative 2 is negative 3. Let's try that in here. So negative 3 squared, subtract negative 3 plus 6. Is that a positive or a negative number? These are 3's. So 9 plus 3 plus 6, that's a positive number. So we put a positive sign there. Something in between negative 2 and 3 is 0. Let's try a 0 in here. So we would have 0 squared, subtract 0, subtract 6. That's a negative number. And something bigger than 3, let's try 4. So 4 squared, subtract 4, subtract 6. 16, subtract 10. That's a positive number as well. So that's what the sign diagram looks like. So zeros are represented on a sign diagram by these little dashes right here. If we have an asymptote on a sign diagram, so if we have a function like y equals 3x over x subtract 5, then we have an vertical asymptote at x equals 5. So our sign diagram would be, we would have a 5 here, and the 0 is a 0, so we need a 0 as well. Okay, but this is a 0, so it's represented with just a tick there. The asymptote is represented like this, okay, with a dotted line. So that represents the asymptote. We still need to put in our positives and negatives here. So if we chose a number smaller than 0, let's choose negative 1. We'll have 3 times negative 1 over negative 1 subtract 5. Negative 3 over negative 6, that's going to be a positive number. Choose a number between 0 and 5. Let's choose 1. It's an easy one to work with. 1 minus 5, that's going to be 3 over negative 4. That's a negative number. And something bigger than 5, let's choose 6. So 3 times 6 over 6 subtract 5 is 18 over 1. That's a positive number. Okay, so that's what the sign diagrams look like. Just a refresher on sign diagrams.